I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I'm just your average guy married to a woman named Sarah. We'd been together for about 7 years, and like any couple, we had our ups and downs. I thought we were doing okay, even if things had felt a little off recently. We decided to seek professional help to get through some rough patches. Our therapist, Dr. Miller, seemed like a decent guy, smart, experienced, and recommended by a friend. But looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the end. It started with little things. I noticed Sarah was more distant, often lost in her phone. The late-night work emails turned into long texting sessions. She started exercising more, paying extra attention to her appearance. At first, I just chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself. After all, she was still my beautiful wife. But an unsettling feeling settled in my gut, like something was off. And then came that fateful day. It was a Thursday, and I was home early from work. I made dinner and waited, expecting Sarah to come home as usual. Instead, when she walked through the door at 9 p.m., she looked flustered and a bit too cheerful. Seeing her so bright-eyed at that hour should have made me happy, but something just didn't add up. I asked her about her day, and she brushed me off, claiming she had a long session with Dr. Miller. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When she went to shower, I took a moment to glance at her phone sitting on the kitchen counter. I hesitated, knowing I shouldn't invade her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and unlocked it with her Face ID, something I felt guilty about even as I did it. What I found sent chills down my spine. Text messages exchanged between her and Dr. Miller, messages that were anything but professional. They were flirty and intimate, filled with inside jokes and emojis. I felt the world tilt beneath me as I read words that I should have never seen. My heart raced, the betrayal hitting me like a ton of bricks. How could she? My mind raced through the implications. Our therapist, the person we trusted to help us, was the very reason our marriage was falling apart. When she emerged from the shower, I confronted her. The look on her face, the way her smile faltered, it was a sight I won't forget. She stammered, trying to come up with excuses and lies. "It's not what you think, Jake. He's just being supportive." Her words dripped with denial, and I could see the panic in her eyes. I told her I had seen the texts, that I knew everything. She tried to backtrack, weaving a web of excuses about therapy and vulnerability, but I saw through it. My anger surged. This wasn't just cheating, it was a betrayal of the most vicious kind. I could feel my heart pounding as I processed what she was saying. The woman who had promised to be loyal to me was sleeping with our therapist. And yet, Sarah continued to talk, trying to convince me that it was just a mistake, a fleeting moment of weakness. But this was more than a moment, it was a full-blown affair. I told her I couldn't believe anything she said anymore. I stormed out of the house, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my mind racing with fury and disbelief. The once warm home felt cold and unwelcoming, like a prison made of lies and deceit. As I drove aimlessly through the night, emotions swelled inside me: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a simmering desire for revenge. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this slide. If she was going to betray me, then I wouldn't let him get away with it unscathed. I had to find a way to make them both pay for what they had done to me. It was time to take action. After that night, my life felt like a whirlwind. I couldn't focus on anything except the overwhelming emotions coursing through me. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between despair and a burning desire for revenge. The next day, I took off work, my mind a chaotic jumble of thoughts. I needed to plan my next move carefully. I started by gathering evidence. I knew I couldn't just confront Dr. Miller without proof. I wanted to hit him where it hurt, and I needed to make sure he couldn't wiggle out of it. I spent hours combing through Sarah's texts, screenshots in hand. I found more messages, including arrangements to meet outside of therapy sessions. My heart raced as I documented everything, feeling like a detective on the hunt for justice. As the days went by, I also noticed other signs of Sarah's betrayal. She became more defensive about her phone and her whereabouts, claiming she was busy with work obligations. The more she tried to cover her tracks, the deeper my anger grew. I didn't want to confront her again. I wanted to make sure I had a solid plan in place before I confronted Dr. Miller. I knew he had to be the focus of my revenge. I began researching professional ethics, therapist conduct codes, everything I could get my hands on. I wanted to gather enough information to ensure that Dr. Miller could not only lose his license, but also face repercussions for his actions. I imagined the havoc I could wreak in both their lives. It felt good to plan. It was a distraction from the pain that was gnawing at my heart. Then came the day I finally decided to make my move. I called the clinic where Dr. Miller worked, pretending to be a potential patient. I learned that he had been practicing for over a decade without any complaints on his record. That made my blood boil even more. How could someone like him exploit his position and yet present himself as a professional without anyone suspecting a thing? I planned to gather more concrete evidence. I needed to prove not only that he was having an affair with my wife, but that he was abusing his position of trust with his clients. So I devised a plan to attend a session with Sarah under the guise of wanting to work on our marriage. I figured if I played it cool, I could observe his behavior and potentially catch him in the act. The next session came and I walked in with a calm facade, heart racing beneath my chest. Sarah seemed genuinely surprised to see me there. "Jake, you actually came," she exclaimed, a mixture of excitement and worry in her voice. I smiled, masking my true intentions. "I thought it might help us if I joined," I replied, trying to act natural. Dr. Miller greeted me with a warm smile, and I could feel my blood boil as I shook his hand. I took my seat, pretending to be engaged in their conversation while secretly observing every move he made. It was infuriating. He acted so professional, so caring, while I knew the truth behind that facade. As the session progressed, I watched as he leaned in toward Sarah, his body language suggesting intimacy and familiarity. My jealousy and anger simmered right below the surface, and I fought the urge to confront him right then and there. Instead, I took mental notes, jotting down everything I could. His words were slick, and at one point he made a comment that made my skin crawl. "It's important to be open with each other. Vulnerability is the key to a strong relationship." How ironic, coming from a man who was betraying not only his marriage but my trust as well. By the end of the session, I felt like a coiled spring ready to explode. I pulled Sarah aside for a moment. "Can we talk?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, her face a mix of apprehension and curiosity. We stepped outside the clinic for some air. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "I know what's going on, Sarah. I know about you and Dr. Miller." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I thought she might cry, but instead she hardened, crossing her arms defensively. "Jake, you don't understand. He was just being supportive. You're the one who—" "Enough," I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "You're lying to me and you know it. You've betrayed me, and now I'm going to make sure he pays for it." That's when I saw it, the flicker of fear in her eyes that told me she knew I meant business. As I walked away, I felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. I was about to take back control of my life, even if it was at the expense of the two people I once trusted most. My plan was set in motion, and I was determined to see it through. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. It was time for revenge, and I was ready to expose Dr. Miller for the fraud he truly was. After that encounter with Sarah, I felt a mix of satisfaction and annoying sadness. I had taken a stand, but at the same time, the reality of my situation sank deeper into my bones. I was not only dealing with the betrayal of my wife, but also the realization that I had to fight to reclaim my life. I was about to wage a war against the man who had violated the trust of our marriage, and I needed to be strategic about it. The following days were a blur of planning and emotional turmoil. I started assembling all my evidence, putting together a comprehensive file that would expose Dr. Miller's unethical practices. I collected every text message, every screenshot, and even started compiling notes from my observations during the sessions. I knew I needed to be thorough. I had to ensure that he couldn't slip through my fingers like a snake. I decided to meet with other clients of his, too. I joined a few local online forums and support groups, pretending to seek advice about marriage counseling. It didn't take long before I stumbled upon a few individuals who shared their experiences with Dr. Miller. It was shocking. Some spoke of how he had overstepped boundaries, made advances, even suggested inappropriate activities that had nothing to do with therapy. My blood boiled as I read their stories. I wasn't alone in my fight. Armed with this knowledge, I felt empowered. I reached out to a few of these individuals and arranged to meet in person. We gathered at a coffee shop, and as we shared our experiences, I felt a sense of camaraderie that was both comforting and infuriating. We were all victims of the same man. It became clear that Dr. Miller had built a pattern of exploitation, and I was determined to bring him down. As we spoke, I learned that one woman had been in a similar situation with her husband, who had also fallen under Dr. Miller's manipulative spell. She recounted how he had made her feel vulnerable and weak, leading her to believe he was the only one who understood her struggles. Listening to her, I felt a deep sense of anger and empathy. How many lives had this man twisted with his charm? After gathering all this information, I knew it was time to take the next step. I called the licensing board that oversaw therapists in our state and requested an appointment. I wanted to present my findings and file a formal complaint against Dr. Miller. I was nervous but determined. This was my chance to fight back. The day of the meeting arrived, and I walked into the office feeling like a man on a mission. I wore a crisp button-down shirt, trying to project confidence, but inside I was a bundle of nerves. The board members greeted me with polite smiles, but I could sense the skepticism in their eyes. They had probably seen countless complaints, many of which may have been unfounded. I had to make them see that Dr. Miller wasn't just a bad therapist, he was a predator. As I presented my evidence, I could see their interest piqued. I spoke passionately about my experiences and those of the other clients who had been wronged. I laid out the timeline of events, my direct evidence of how he had crossed boundaries, and how Sarah's affair had been a direct consequence of his manipulation. I could feel my anger rising as I recounted how he had betrayed the very trust placed in him as a mental health professional. The board members took notes, asking questions and probing deeper into the details. I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I was doing this. I was standing up for not only myself but for all the others who had been victimized. I knew in my gut that I had to see this through. After what felt like an eternity, they thanked me for my testimony and assured me they would investigate my claims. I left the office feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I had taken the first step in what would undoubtedly be a long and arduous process, but I was committed. I would not rest until Dr. Miller's license was revoked. The next few weeks were excruciating. I watched as Sarah tried to act like nothing had changed, but I was not the same man anymore. I felt like I was living a double life, acting civil while plotting revenge. She still tried to engage me in conversations about our marriage, about healing and moving forward, but every time she opened her mouth, I felt a wave of anger wash over me. I wasn't ready to forgive. I was still in the thick of betrayal and pain. I continued, following up with the licensing board, often visiting their office or making calls. I insisted on updates, making it clear that I wasn't going to let this slide. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with the other clients I had met, and together we began to form a support network. We shared our frustrations and fears, and I felt a sense of solidarity in our shared struggle. One evening, as I was going over my notes and preparing for my next meeting with the board, I received a call from one of the women I had met. She shared some shocking news. She had discovered another client who had been threatened by Dr. Miller, someone who had been too afraid to speak out. This was the break we needed. With her permission, I reached out to him, and he was willing to come forward. I felt a surge of hope as I realized we were building something bigger than myself. We were all taking a stand against a man who had abused his position of power. The more voices we gathered, the stronger our case became. I was filled with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in a long time. As I looked around the small group of people who had become my allies, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make a difference. I was no longer just a man wronged by his wife. I was part of something larger, a movement to hold a predator accountable. And I was going to make sure Dr. Miller paid for what he had done. The momentum was building, and I could feel the weight of our collective stories pushing us forward. With each new piece of evidence and testimony, I was reminded of the strength that comes from unity. The other survivors and I worked diligently to compile our accounts, ensuring we were ready for the next round with the licensing board. It was no longer just about me. It was about bringing down someone who had hurt so many. We decided to organize a formal meeting where everyone could present their experiences with Dr. Miller. I reached out to the board again, insisting that they allow us to present as a group. After some negotiation, they agreed. The meeting was scheduled, and I felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. This was it. We would take a stand together. The day of the meeting arrived, and as I walked into the boardroom with my fellow survivors, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The room was filled with board members, all looking serious and ready to hear our stories. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that we were doing this for all the people who had suffered at the hands of Dr. Miller. One by one, we shared our experiences. Each story echoed the same themes of manipulation, betrayal, and emotional turmoil. I watched as the board members scribbled notes, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. When it was my turn, I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve stronger than ever. I'm here because I believe in accountability. I began, my voice steady. Dr. Miller used his position of power to manipulate my wife and many others. I have seen the damage he has caused, not only to my marriage but to the lives of everyone in this room. I shared my story, detailing how I had discovered Sarah's affair and how Dr. Miller had facilitated it under the guise of therapy. As I spoke, I could see the board. Members exchanging glances, nodding in understanding. I felt a rush of relief. This was the moment I had been fighting for. After we all shared, the board held a discussion. They acknowledged the patterns we had presented and expressed their concern for the ethical boundaries Dr. Miller had crossed. As they deliberated, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe justice was within reach. Finally, they announced that they would conduct a thorough investigation into Dr. Miller's practices. I felt a knot of tension release from my chest. We had done it. We had sparked the beginning of real change. But as we left the meeting, my sense of victory was mixed with anxiety. The investigation could take time, and I was acutely aware that Dr. Miller might retaliate. I had already seen how manipulative he could be. What if he tried to turn things around and discredit us? What if he went after Sarah to silence her? These thoughts plagued me as I drove home. When I arrived, Sarah was waiting for me. She looked apprehensive but hopeful. "Jake, I want to talk about us," she said, her voice shaky. I felt a wave of anger rise in me. "What's there to talk about, Sarah? You've made your choices and they've hurt me deeply." She opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. I could see the guilt in her eyes. "I know I messed up. I just thought, maybe we could work through this, now that you're doing something about Dr. Miller." It was infuriating to hear her suggest that we could work through our issues while she was still living in the delusion that everything would go back to normal. "You think we can just erase what happened? You carried on an affair with him while you were seeing him as our therapist. How can I trust you again?" She looked devastated, and for a moment I almost felt sympathy for her. But then I remembered the betrayal, the way she had lied to my face. I wanted to believe in redemption, but could I truly forgive her? "Jake, I want to make it right. I'll go to the board and tell them everything. I'll do whatever it takes," she pleaded, desperation evident in her voice. I stood there, wrestling with my thoughts. Part of me wanted to scream at her, too. Throw her out of my life completely. But another part, a small part, wondered if there was any chance at redemption. I realized then that I needed to focus on the fight ahead. "I won't stop until Dr. Miller is held accountable," I said firmly. "But I don't know if I can even consider working on us right now. I need time to think." As I walked away, I could hear the quiet sobs escape her lips. It felt surreal, walking away from someone I once loved so deeply. I couldn't help but feel a touch of remorse, but I also knew I had to be strong. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt both liberating and terrifying. The next few weeks were a blur. The investigation into Dr. Miller continued, and I was relieved to hear that the board was taking our complaints seriously. They interviewed other clients and even reached out to Sarah for her side of the story. I knew this was a pivotal moment. Sarah would have to face the consequences of her choices. As I sat in my car one evening, I received a call from one of the board members. "Jake, we want to inform you that Dr. Miller's license is under review. We're finding numerous ethical violations in his practice and will be moving forward with a formal hearing." A wave of triumph washed over me. This was the moment I had fought for, and yet I still had mixed feelings. I couldn't shake the sense of loss I felt for my marriage. I knew I had to make a decision about Sarah, but I wasn't ready. The battle against Dr. Miller had consumed me, and now I had to confront the reality of what had happened in my own heart. It was time to face the truth. I had taken down a predator, but what remained of my relationship with Sarah? Was that something I could salvage, or was it simply a remnant of what once was? The hearing against Dr. Miller was looming, and as the date approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. This was the culmination of everything I had fought for, but it also meant facing the reality of my marriage, of Sarah. I had managed to keep my focus on bringing Dr. Miller down, pushing my feelings about Sarah to the background, but now, with the hearing less than a week away, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Sarah was still trying to reach out, her guilt manifesting in the form of desperate texts and apologies. Each time I saw her name light up my phone, I felt a surge of anger mixed with the remnants of love I once had for her. I debated whether to even respond. Would it do any good? Was there any chance we could possibly rebuild what was dead? On a particularly restless night, I finally responded. "We need to talk." I could feel the gravity of my own words as I hit send. She replied almost instantly, her excitement palpable. "Can I come over, please? I really want to explain myself." When she arrived, her face was pale, eyes puffy from crying. I could see the toll this was taking on her. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but the other part was still angry, still wounded. I motioned for her to sit down, and the weight of the silence in the room was suffocating. "Jake, I know I've messed up, and I can't express how sorry I am," she began, her voice shaky. "I never intended for things to go this far. I thought I was being vulnerable in therapy, but Dr. Miller took advantage of that. It was wrong, and I hate myself for it." I clenched my fists, memories flooding back. "But you went along with it, Sarah. You didn't just talk to him, you slept with him, you chose him over me." "I know," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I was so lost. I didn't know how to handle my feelings, and he made me feel understood. Initially, I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just harmless flirting until it was, and then I was too far in to pull back." Her words felt hollow, and I struggled to muster any sense of compassion. "You don't get to lie to me and expect me to forgive you just because you feel guilty now. What you did was a betrayal, and that's not something I can just forget. I want to make it right, Jake. I'll go to the board, I'll tell them everything. I'll do whatever it takes to make amends," she pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. As I listened, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the reality of our fractured relationship. What if they revoke his license and you still can't forgive yourself? What if you still don't love me the way you used to? "I love you, Jake, I do," she exclaimed, her voice rising in desperation. "I messed up, but I want to fix it. I'll do anything. I can't lose you." I looked at her, seeing the woman I once adored, but the betrayal was too fresh. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Sarah. I don't even know if I want to try." Her face fell, the fight in her eyes dimming. "Please just give me a chance. I don't expect everything to go back to normal, but I'm willing to fight for us. I'll be honest. I'll work on myself. I'll make sure this never happens again." I paused, reflecting on her words. My heart wavered, but my mind was screaming at me to protect myself. "You've spent so long hiding the truth, lying to me. Why should I believe you now?" "Because I'm here," she replied softly, her voice full of sincerity. "Because I want to take responsibility for what I did. I want you to see that I'm working to be better." I felt torn. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to give her the chance she was asking for, but another part of me remained wary, fearful of repeating the cycle of betrayal. I can't promise that we'll work out, but I'll consider what you've said." The conversation left me more conflicted than before. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to balance the weight of my feelings with the fight ahead. The hearing was approaching fast, and all I could think about was the opportunity to hold Dr. Miller accountable. Finally, the day arrived. I walked into the boardroom flanked by my fellow survivors. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. I could see members of the board shuffling paperwork, and then Dr. Miller walked in, looking just as calm and composed as ever. The sight of him sent a jolt of anger through me. As the hearing began, I watched. The board members listened, nodding along as we recounted our experiences. Each testimony added another layer to the case against him. I felt a sense of empowerment as I shared my story, detailing the emotional devastation his actions had caused. When it was finally time for Dr. Miller to speak, I could hardly contain my rage. He tried to twist the narrative, portraying himself as a misunderstood professional doing his best to help clients. "These allegations are false," he insisted, his voice dripping with feigned concern. "I always maintain a professional relationship with my clients. I never intended to hurt anyone." But the board members weren't buying it. They asked him pointed questions, probing into his methods and interactions with us. Each question seemed to tighten the noose around his neck. I could see the sweat forming on his brow, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. As the hearing continued, I couldn't help but glance at Sarah, who sat in the back of the room. She looked nervous but determined. I was glad she had decided to show up. It meant she was committed to owning her part in this mess. But part of me still struggled with the idea of ever trusting her again. After hours of testimony, the board announced a break. I stepped outside, needing to breathe. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I couldn't shake the fear that maybe Dr. Miller would find a way to manipulate this situation in his favor. But as I looked at the group of individuals who had banded together, I felt a sense of unity and strength. We were all fighting for the same thing, a chance for justice, a chance to expose someone who had hurt us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this battle would end in victory, not just for me but for everyone Dr. Miller had wronged. As the hearing resumed, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for the next round. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that my fight was about more than just revenge. It was about standing up for myself and ensuring that no one else would fall victim to Dr. Miller's manipulative ways. The hearing resumed after the break, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. My fellow survivors and I sat together, exchanging encouraging glances. Each of us had come too far to back down now. The board members were serious, their expressions thoughtful as they prepared to deliver their judgments. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, a tangible reminder of the stakes we were all facing. Dr. Miller took his seat again, his demeanor still composed, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I wondered if he realized how much trouble he was in. As the board began to deliberate, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What if they didn't believe us? What if he somehow managed to manipulate the narrative in his favor? After what felt like an eternity, the lead board member stood up, clearing his throat. "We've reviewed the testimonies and evidence presented. We take these allegations seriously, and it's clear that Dr. Miller has violated multiple ethical guidelines in his practice." My heart raced as I listened, hope swelling within me. "Dr. Miller," the board member continued, "you have demonstrated a pattern of behavior that is unacceptable for a licensed professional. Therefore, we are revoking your license to practice therapy effective. Immediately, you will not be allowed to practice in this state again." A wave of relief washed over me, and I could hear audible gasps from the other survivors. I looked around at my friends, those who had also suffered at the hands of this man. Tears filled my eyes as I realized that we had won. We had fought back against a predator, and justice had been served. The board member continued, "We recommend that you seek further education on ethical practices before attempting to re-enter the field." Dr. Miller's face blanched, and for a brief moment I felt a rush of satisfaction at seeing him finally face the consequences of his actions. As the hearing concluded, I turned to my fellow survivors and we embraced in a group hug. It felt surreal. We had all fought so hard to reclaim our lives and hold this man accountable. I looked over at Sarah, who was standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of relief and trepidation. Walking over to her, I felt a swirl of emotions. "I can't believe it," I said, trying to gauge her reaction. "We actually did it. Jake, thank you for standing up for all of us," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm truly sorry for everything. This doesn't change the past, but I want to work on being better for myself and for you if you'll let me." I took a step back, weighing her words. There was a part of me that wanted to believe in a future together, but I also knew that rebuilding trust would take time. "I appreciate your willingness to confront your mistakes, Sarah. But I need to process everything that's happened. This was a huge battle and I need space to figure out what I want." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. I just hope you know how genuinely sorry I am." I didn't reply, but I felt a mix of compassion and unresolved anger. As we left the building, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few months start to lift off my shoulders. I had fought for justice and achieved it, but the road ahead for my personal life was still uncertain. In the weeks that followed, I took time to reflect on everything that had transpired. I focused on healing myself, working through the betrayal, the anger, and the sadness. I began therapy with a new counselor, someone who was genuinely interested in helping me rebuild my life. My focus shifted from revenge to self-care. It was a long and winding road, but I was learning to reclaim parts of myself I had lost in the chaos. Sarah reached out periodically, expressing her desire to make amends, but I kept my distance. I knew that rushing back into a relationship with her could lead to more pain. I needed to prioritize my own emotional well-being first. Eventually, we did meet again, cautiously stepping into conversations about our past. I could see how genuine she was in wanting to change, and I appreciated her honesty. However, I made it clear that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. In the end, I recognized the importance of forgiveness, not just for her, but for myself. Holding on to anger only served to weigh me down. I learned that healing isn't linear, and it's okay to take things one step at a time. As for Dr. Miller, rumors circulated about his attempts to appeal the board's decision, but I paid little attention. I had achieved what I set out to do, expose him for the fraud he was. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, and I had to let it go. Reflecting on this journey, I realized that this experience had more than just been about revenge. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, my capacity for resilience, and the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly cared. While the scars of betrayal would always remain, I had emerged stronger and more self-aware. To anyone reading this who may find themselves in a similar situation, know that it's okay to seek help, to stand up for yourself, and to fight for justice. You deserve to be heard, and you deserve to reclaim your life. Sometimes that means letting go of those who have hurt you, even when it's hard. You have the power to choose your path forward, and it's never too late to start anew.